thing Clubhouse, Tyson?
No.
It's this new social media thing that I think is going to replace podcasts. It's like live conversations going on all around the world about any subject 24 hours a day, and you can just pop in. So I just learned about Clubhouse 4 days ago. I was just telling Marissa about it, and I opened a room so that other people who may be somewhere in the world can hear us as well, because there's no recording there. It's just a live room and people can come in and hear it. So never done it before. I'm a virgin room. So
I'm doing that. That sounds perfect. I like that.
Cool. I spent one night till like 3 a.m. I was in a room called Talk Nerdy to Me, and it was all these AI and gamers and neuroscientists talking about things way over my head, but it was fascinating because you can just listen, or you can raise your hand and ask to participate, but you can also just listen in, and then there's like a button for leaving quietly, but there's no texting, or it's just conversation, and you can, so like we're about to have a conversation. So
yeah, that's it.
Your book, Sand Talk, it changed my brain very early in the process. Someone was telling me a story, a linear story, and I suddenly started seeing it in a new way. I don't know what you're doing, but it changed my brain, and just made it possible for me to, I don't know. And that languaging that you call pattern brain, I realized that that was a more comfortable way for me to talk about something I experience, which is a kind of, I sometimes quote know things, like this movie Red Pill, which is what inspired these talks, is that I would know things, and when I would tell them about things, people just treat me with contempt. And I knew how this political thing was going to go down this fall, and I made a movie about it because people just treated me so contemptuously for even having the idea. And I thought, oh, that's really pattern mind. I'm not seeing a future or predicting anything. I'm just seeing the patterns that are very obvious to me. So I would love you to talk more about that.
Because it's just not magic, is it? It's like I wake up this morning and I see Charlie Pride has passed away. And I know that by the end of next week, I'm going to have to be eating starch again. And it's like, well, how do those two things connect? Well, those things connect because Charlie Pride is really big over here in the Aboriginal community, like all over Australia. But particularly, in a lot of remote communities where I have really strong, relations and family and all that sort of thing. That's going to go, oh my goodness. Like I don't want to pick up my phone because I don't want to, like, people are going to be really, really upset. So your local Aboriginal radio stations, they're pretty much 3/4 of all the music is just Charlie Pride. Because for some reason, everybody likes country music, except me, but particularly Charlie Pride. That's like the cornerstone of everything. There's even informal rules that between the hours of such and such and such and such, you can only have Charlie Pride. So there's going to be a lot of people are going to want to drink. And so there'll be people who will probably, have like a wake. There's going to be lots of wakes for Charlie Pride. And so that's not going to affect me immediately, but by next week, when people have run out of money for, because they had to have that wake, there's not enough money. They're going to run out of money for food and nappies for the babies and stuff like that. And then they're all going to call me. And I know that next week it's going to cost me at least $500 just in nappies. And I'm not going to be able to eat protein for the next month. I'm going to have to start eating noodles and rice again. Which is going to affect my performance. And it's Charlie Pride is going to ruin my bowel movements for the next 2 months. Anyway.
I get it.
But that's my selfish pattern. That's if I just look at my life. But I guess the book isn't about that. That's about turning around the other way and looking out at the world, not just looking inwards at the subjective and local, but turning that gaze out and seeing what falls out of it. Yeah. And I guess like you, when I first, because it was like, God, nearly a couple of years ago now, put the book out, and when it was getting published, the reaction from a lot of people was, oh, yeah, Tyson, I don't think things are that bad. You know, it's,
Mhm.
I think you've gone, the sky is falling. You're a bit chicken little. I think
Mhm.
you're overestimating the extent of the crisis in the world. Human ingenuity will be fine. Um, and, not that many sold. And then all of a sudden, the world's on fire and everybody's like grabbing that book and reading it and going, wow, this gives us hope. So it's gone so far the other way. What people thought was pessimism before, they think it's optimism now. And I guess like you suddenly come off like a genius, but it's really just everybody knows this stuff.
Well, it's
There you
available
go.
for them to see. They just don't want to see it, or they don't want to face it as a possibility. I was
Yeah, that's it.
particularly taken with your whole concept that here in these what we you call domesticated cultures, that we get to pretend we're nonviolent and we're so holier than thou and sit in judgment, but that we export our violence, and that our violence is evidenced in our phones and our, our seafood, our gas.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's evidenced in it, but yeah, I know what you're saying. It's just there. It's in these little safe, anywhere where you're not experiencing sort of violence, in the world as it is. It's a world that's really set up on violence and a very violent system. If you're not experiencing it, then yeah, you're certainly benefiting from it. Um, yeah, but basically that's what civilizations do. They outsource their entropy, so their decay, that they outsource that to other places. Violence, incredible violence has to be done in order to confer this much privilege.
Mm.
And then they send it out elsewhere. And people, even now, COVID, you see people going, oh yeah, we're all, I hear it all the time. Yeah, humans right now, we're all just, in our rooms, on our laptops, and we're having to work from home. It's the tiniest percentage of the population of the world are doing that,
Right.
and so you've got people, doing coaching and stuff like that, and the people like Jordan Peterson and all those are getting up there and making millions of dollars by telling people to clean their room. Like,
Mhm.
wow, what an idea! Like, you get your life together, just clean your room, start with that, eh? And then yeah, but it's this assumption that everyone has their own room.
Mm.
I've never had my own room. Like, I don't know what that would be like to have my own room, you know? Yeah. I mean, I wake up this morning, there's bloody 12, 13 people in my house. Tomorrow there'll be five. It's, these things shift around, but you certainly don't get to have your own room like most of the people on the planet. So it's
Yeah.
these little bubbles, and I don't know, privilege is probably not the right word. It kind of makes it sound like, I don't know, it's not the right word for what it is.
Well, I consider
It's
that.
not just privilege, it's a grand sort of theft, and
Mm.
this invisibility of these little safe havens that are not very safe. Like they're going to burn soon.
Right.
Yeah.
My quote, the word privilege like becomes this dual edged sword, because for me it was a privilege to grow up with five generations under one roof,
Yeah.
that I knew, I saw birth and death in under my roof, and so there's a way of being and a connection to before me and beyond me that my own children don't have.
Mm. Yeah, that's it. Look, and you try to put your finger on it, and there's lots of, I guess, in sort of Aboriginal ways of looking, uh, sort of looking at the world and doing inquiry into things, is that when new knowledge comes in, you've got to get to the foundational story of that new knowledge. Like you really look deeply at that, and where is that coming from? So what's the story for this? And then that has to sort of come in, ritually through everything that you do, and you work with that and figure it out, and then you go from there. And I guess I don't know. I think the foundational story of this thing we're calling privilege is a it's a wrong definition of belonging, and because so that affects all your relations, your relationship with people, particularly with the people you fuck, and but with the relationship with every single human and non-human entity in the world, because belonging in this weird Anglosphere culture that's all over the world, belonging means owning
Mhm.
something. So there's an ownership to that. So even with your closest intimate partner, that's about even at the deepest and tenderest feelings in you, that is about ownership. So that person belongs to you. But that when we say this in my culture, when we say, belonging, who do you belong to? Or like, I belong to her, or, you know, so I'll say like, I say all the time, like, oh, my woman, such and such, that's my woman. And people like, they recoil, like, you can't say that. That's like, you misogynist, you think you own that woman. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, that's my woman, you know.
Well,
And if I say she belongs to me, then that doesn't mean I own her. Although we use the word own with the same thing, that means that we're in relation, and that means I can't do anything, without it lining up with her first. It has to go through a filter of us two, the two of us. So we belong together. We're a pair. That's the central pair of my life, and that's who I am. Because who you are and all your knowledge is not in you, it's in your relationships, with other people, but also particularly with place. Places are sentient, so you're in relation to them, and that knowledge sits in that relation. But then all the human and non-human things all around you. So this idea of belonging, that's a human idea. That's not unique to Aboriginal culture. That's how we're supposed to all be,
mm,
But it's this silly sort of tinkered system that's been placed on the top, for a few people to think that they're greater than everyone else. This other system's been placed on top, and we all have to live by it. Even in our intimate relations, we have to think that belonging means owning, holding, keeping, trapping something.
I've always known in an intuitive way that trees and rocks are sentient beings. Like rocks are in a different time way than we are. They move, they travel, I've just known that. And I have tree families all over the world. I can come into a town at midnight and it's pitch black, and I would be like, my family's over there. I've got to go and find.
Mm-mm-mm.
So I was deeply, and I've also felt like, if there's a devil, it's God's devil. So when you talked about the greatest sin or the devil or Lucifer being the belief that you are above anything, that struck me very strongly because I don't feel like it's a sinful thing for me to look at anyone anywhere and feel like there, but the grace of, this goddess universe, go I could be anything that anyone is. I could be it. And I walk in my life that way. So it was a resonant thing because that's not, I live in New York City. So, that is not a philosophy of New York City.
Mm. It's funny, isn't it? Um, so we kind of accept this system. We accept a system of structural inequality because we hope that we might climb within that. That we might, because we all of us have swallowed that not red pill. We've swallowed that pill of, yeah, I think I'm greater than, I'm better than other people. Like I wish everybody knew this. If people could just see, how great I am. And so we think, so we let them do this to us. We let them do it to us because we know that we might have a chance to do the same.
Mm,
And so off we go. And I guess as we go through the conversation, I wouldn't mind talking about like what structural inequality really is,
tell us.
because I don't think most of the left even understands what the hell they're talking about when they say structural inequality.
What is it?
Oh, what now? So okay, it's not okay, like racism, prejudice, all this stuff, that's not something that's inside of us. Like I said before, knowledge is in our relations, outside of us anyway. There's not much inside you at all. There's certainly not evil in there, you know. Um, so all this prejudice, racism, etc., we keep thinking that it's a problem of a few bad apples, that there's these racists out there, and if we could just get rid of them, or if we could just re-educate them, then that inequality would go away. And so even when we talk about systemic equality, we talk about it in terms of, well, there are people in positions of power. There are people in powerful positions, all the way through the administration of this nation. And that's what makes structural inequality. No, it's not.
Well, what is it?
So racism is just a function of a growth-based economy.
Mm.
Okay, so if you have a growth-based economy, like just read the first chapter of any economics handbook and you'll go, okay, I see it. So basically nothing in a growth-based economy can have a price unless it's limitable and excludable. So you have to be able to make sure that what you're selling can't be abundant. It's got to be scarce. So you have to limit it, and you have to be able to exclude some people from having it, because then it will have value to the other people who are greater than that. So you need at least 50% of your people, of your population, at any time to be in lower castes. And it doesn't really matter who they are, but it might make it easier to police that and keep them there if you pick, ones that all have one arbitrary characteristic or something,
Yeah,
and basically that's all it is. You need, basically it's the law of supply and demand, and you've heard of that, right?
I have heard a little bit about the law of supply and
So
demand.
yeah, and you must keep hearing about this GDP that has to keep growing every year forever, otherwise the entire economy will collapse.
Yeah, but
If the
there's
GDP if the GDP stops growing, it's a recession. If it goes backwards, it's a depression. Basically the way that works is that there has to be more demand than supply in order for the economy to grow. You've got to have more demand than supply. So that means there has to be more people needing shit than there are people getting shit. So there's only so much shit that you can make, and there's so many people, and there has to be quite a lot of them missing out on it in order for any of that to have value,
But what about
in
some
order
of the
for the economy
artists?
to grow.
What about some of
So
the artists now who are starting to give away their product? Like artists are starting to like, here, I'm giving it away. How does that
yeah,
affect
well
the
that
economy?
I think I hope that goes everywhere. That's a huge revolution, because it's funny. There's two things taken that really make all this system work. One of them's art, and strangely enough, because art, I mean, for a start, you look at any indigenous language, you won't find a word for art.
Mm.
Art doesn't exist as a separate thing. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we make meaning in the world. That's
Mm-hmm.
how we make knowledge. That's how we express. That's how we connect with spirit every day of our lives. Every single one of us is a genius artist. But you
Mm-hmm.
know what I said about limitability and excludability? Yeah, no, you have to like shame everybody and make sure that everyone's policing each other and telling each other, don't give up your day job if they try and draw a nice picture. You're not an artist. No, that special people. So we choose. Oh my God, they're screaming out there.
Life is
So
happening.
they choose a few people to elevate and go, well, these are the artists, and they pay them heaps of money. And then they have a few stragglers like who are hoping to climb that ladder. And and then we've all got to worship these ones at the top of the pyramid making the art. Stuff that basically what it's for is that art is capital for rich people.
Exactly. And it's a fake
So
market. It's
yeah,
a
and the
fake market.
margins, and there's nothing creative about centers of privilege. So, where all the wealth goes, those people can't create anything because they've got nothing. They're not in the world. They're not in struggle. They're not in life. So you got to go to the margins and either steal from people at the margins, you know, or you've got to, elevate a couple of individuals from the margins in order to have anything coming through. So most of the fashion in the world comes from, African Americans. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that's what drives the fashion industry. It's all basically plundered knowledge, from people who have very innovative, ways of adorning themselves because they're just living in, you know, horror every day. So you got to be creative.
Yeah.
People at the center can't create those things. So all art, etc., it comes, and all creativity comes from the margins, and basically that becomes capital, for the rich. And capital's the key, because then you come to the other thing, that makes the whole thing work, which is land. So 2/3 of the capital in the world is land, and it hasn't always been thus. Mortgages were only invented a relatively short period of time ago, and they were invented as a legal trick to get land off Indians
Mm-hmm.
on your big island over there.
Mm-hmm.
It was invented as a legal trick to do that, and it worked so well they decided to just survey every inch of the planet and bring everyone under that. So you have, land is no longer land. Land is something that you can borrow against and enclose, and that can be foreclosed against, and you hold it, and it's capital. And you can borrow into infinity against that if you hold it.
Yeah,
But
that's
in order to do that and enclose it, you have to remove the people from the land. And that's only been happening for a couple of centuries. All the people have to be removed from the land. 100 years ago, most of the people on the planet were still living on the land.
mm.
That was only 100 years ago. And this idea of nations, that was only invented a century ago. So they had to pull everybody off the land and put everybody into these urban or rural town kind of environments, um, metropolitan environments, and remove them from the land. And the land is what gives you your art. It's what gives you your meaning. It's what gives you your shelter. It's what gives you your food, your sustenance, everything. It gives you that for free. But they've enclosed that and turned it into capital for the basis of this financial system. So we can't have access to that. If we want to have access to the things we used to get from the land for free,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if we want to have that, then we have to sell 1/3 of our life to, state and corporate. It's the state and the economy is what provides the things for us now that land used to give us for free. But you got to sell 1/3 of your life, your work, your labor, in order to get that.
In order to get
Um,
back what was given to you by
yeah,
for free.
exactly, and in a really bad form. Starch is not a good thing to eat too much of, and that's pretty much all most of us can afford. Is a lot of starch, so we get a pale shadow of what the land used to give us for free, and we're all locked up. We're all like just feedlot pigs, and we
I
need to get out.
I love what you
Yeah,
said about art as something that we do. That was something I experienced when I was in Bali, and I noticed that the people, the way they made a bag to carry the thing you bought away, like everything they made was a piece of art. Art was what they breathed, and
yeah,
they didn't even put a value on it. It was just how they did things. So you'd go into stores and there wouldn't be prices because it's like, well, whatever you think it's worth, because I was going to do it this good anyway. So if it's worth
that's it.
you, great.
Yeah, and I'll be making another one tomorrow because
Right.
that's what I do. You know. Yeah,
And then so that doesn't work in a market because we have to make it exclusive. You got to
that's
only
it.
make 4 of these because we want to sell it for $1 million. And
Yeah.
now you can't keep on living your life and doing what you just do naturally because we've now turned your life into
Yeah.
a commodity.
Well, if you look at, so you look at weaving in Indonesia, and you look at weaving just, a few hundred k's away, kilometers away, weaving in an Aboriginal community. If you went to Indonesia and you killed 95% of all the people there, and there was only a few hundred weavers left, then that would be worth something.
Because everything they weaved would be so
Well,
scared.
it would be rare and exclusive. And once it's rare and exclusive, you're okay. So, you go a few hundred kilometers away to where people are doing the same thing in the north of Australia, and kind of a lot of time very similar styles with the weaving, making baskets. That basket is worth quite a bit. You're going to pay $100 for that basket from an Aboriginal community, because it's rare. It's very rare. But if you go to Indonesia, there must be a million of those being produced a day over there. So yeah, they're the same quality of basket, but one of them's worth 50 cents and one of them's worth $100.
But it's worth that based on this growth-based economy, which
Yeah,
requires this invention of scarcity.
requires that things must be scarce and rare. It requires that you kill the goose that laid the golden egg
Right.
in order for that golden egg to be worth anything.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. So, and that's why, I mean, you can't have a prison industrial complex in place that's grounded in that growth-based economy, and just somehow tweak that and make it fairer. You can't just like you can't just go, Black Lives Matter because I've got that bumper sticker. Amazon's putting Black Lives Matter poster up on its wall there. That's all right now. That's going to be fair. We're going to make sure that everybody has equal access to this and that, and we're going to feel better about it. But it's just you can't have equality in a growth-based economic system.
So
you can't tweak it. You can't tweak it. Or okay, if you want to be so basically. So if, I don't know, let's say my community, if we wanted to be equal with the rest of the Australian community, we'd have to import a group of people from somewhere else and put them beneath us. And they would have to take our place. Then we could go up. I don't know, if you try putting all this stuff on a bell curve and tweak the stats as much as you can, and you'll find that you can't close those gaps statistically, mathematically, in any other way. It doesn't work in this system of metrics that we have. The maths doesn't work.
So what do we
for equality? So you have to end growth, basically. You have to end the idea of growth-based economies and go to a completely different economic system if you want people to be equal. You can't make a dog a vegan.
What system would we go to? How would it look? How would it
look?
Keep our violence with us and share the violence within our own communities so that we were not exporting our violence?
Yeah. Well, for a start, violence is just we have a really negative picture of violence. So basically in any complex adaptive system, there is a fair amount of sort of conflict, strong energy, those kinds of things, what we call violence. But that is distributed throughout the system in a healthy system. It's in tiny amounts all the way through, so that every single point, every agent in that system has a tiny bit of that. And so that's just happening all the time, but it's not doing any damage. It doesn't do damage to the system because it's just, it's expressed.
You mean like
so basically every sustainable culture has ways of expressing, violence and detonating that, in ways that are very public, very transparent, highly rule governed and ritualized, and out that goes. But that's that violence side of things. But basically an economic system would be the same thing. It's this one word, distributed, and that doesn't mean redistributing all the things that have a price and that some people think are valuable. It changes the idea of value right from the start. If all of your information and energy and resources and everything else are in a constant state of flow and flux and exchange going right through the system. So that's what they call in economics, for example, the velocity of the dollar. So the velocity of the dollar is a measure of economic health. And that's the amount of times that a dollar changes hands.
Okay.
So your GDP doesn't make for a healthy economy, and even most economists will even admit that if you press them a bit. But the measure that they really look for to see if an economy is working is the velocity of the dollar. So
So
that's
right
how many times it's changing hands, how far and wide and variably it's moving throughout the system. So, if you've got every unit of value and energy and everything else in a system moving rapidly right throughout that system, being exchanged so many times, not being collected and gathered into these big static heaps of death, but actually in constant movement, that's when you've got a healthy system.
is there a healthy system anywhere on the planet anymore?
Um, well, you can't, yeah, unfortunately, systems need to interact with other systems. So, you could put a big fence around the Amazon or, you can create these national parks, but they're islands of death. Ecosystems move a couple of 100 meters every year. Everything's always moving, and that if you haven't got at least corridors linking up all of these things, so there can be free flow between the systems of matter, energy, etc., etc. Everything exists within the systems, but across these natural systems in these closed loops where everything's recycled through. But right now we have a world where most of the world is in these open loops, you know. So some places things are going in, but nothing's coming out.
Mm.
Other places things are being taken out, but nothing's going in. And so you end up with these open loop systems all around the planet. And anyway, so you might have some closed loop systems happening in some national parks, but the problem is that's not happening at the bigger level across with the other systems. One forest has to talk to the next bioregion and talks to this one and this one. And we understand this in our stories. So we had a big fish die off right down the Murray-Darling rivers, which is goes through several states. This Murray-Darling system, the river was dying up and billions of fish died. And this was before the fires. And as soon as I saw that happen, I said, "Oh, that Kangaroo Island's going to burn." A Kangaroo Island's like in the ocean, right down the bottom of Australia. But it's on that same that they're connected through all these systems. And I know that story of the system of those rivers going all the way down. It's a big codfish story. It goes right down and it ends there with that big fella on that island going up into the sky. So those stories tell us how all those systems are connected and how they exchange matter and energy and information. And we sing those stories as custodians, so that it continues. And so I knew as soon as the fish died that island was going to burn. And surely enough, within a year, it did, because you think, well, what's that island in the middle of the salt water there? What's that got to do with a freshwater river system, hundreds of miles away? And well, they're connected. Those systems exchange energy and they exchange matter, all the time. Mm-hmm. And energy has to be flowing within, but then across different systems. That's that first law of thermodynamics. If you look into physics, it's that same one.
Now, you said you sing it. Does that have something to do with the song lines?
Yeah. And that's these are just ways of trying to understand things. Nothing translates well into English.
We'll try.
So if you have a language that has no word for art and no word for culture, because who the hell would be insane enough to separate those things from your actual life and from the land? It is hard to talk about things, but song lines, yeah, but you hybridize thought, you creolize things, and you get some, you use some English words, but you attach different meaning, like I said, belonging before. So song lines, that'll do, yeah, to explain that. But this is talking about like a dynamic map, a map in your inner landscapes that are part of these, these landscapes in the land that they're just in you anyway, and you belong to those places and those things. And, and you belong to this creation event, which is in past, present, future, which is just continuing through that landscape. And, all those entities in that landscape have substance and energy that's always going through you. and you sit there and you can follow those lines of law, capital LAW, through the landscape. But then also the LORE, which is the story that kind of that is one of the threads of that, and you follow them through. There's some old ladies who are calling it song spirals now.
Because
Well, because it's hard to, when you say lines, you see a line.
it's linear.
Yeah, and that's not quite it. And then so some people try and think of it as almost a stack as well,
Hmm.
because there's lots of layers to it. But then that doesn't work either, So there's quite a few. There's a book called Song Spirals that female knowledge keepers have put out, and they started calling it song spirals. But I guess this is how things evolve, with language and with changing environments and cultures, etc.
I
Yeah,
think that the drawings you had in your book, even though I couldn't, I think that they must have been doing something to my brain because I feel after reading Sand Talk, my brain changed. And, the words were the words, but there were those drawings that I see them. I
yeah,
couldn't give you words for them.
yeah,
They were communicating to me in some kind of way.
yeah. I mean, the words were just the delivery system to sort of make those pictures into a book that people might want to pick up and look at the pictures, basically. But the images are from elders, old people, but particularly there were 6 of them from old man Juma Fijo, from Northern Territory, Larrakia people, and those symbols are part of a big ritual magic that he, like nearly 10 years ago now, he gave me those things and said that I need to make sure as many people in the world see them as possible. Um, and basically, they're designed to change you at the molecular level. It
I
should come with
believe
a warning, like, I don't know. I don't know about the ethics of that, but I just do what my old people tell me. But basically, anybody who's seeing that and thinking through their own stories and hearing that other story from here, anybody who's looking at that with intent and doing that story work, it will change their DNA. And he sees it as a big ritual magic to bring what he called the 7 spirit families
mm.
of humankind back together. The 7 spirit families have to come back together.
What are the
And
seven spirit families?
well, um, yeah, so I think a lot of that is connected to the idea of the 7 sisters, the Pleiades constellation. It's weird because all around the world, people call that 7 sisters, even though there's more than 7 stars in that constellation, and it doesn't look like sisters at all. Everyone's got the same story for that. So he says that everybody came out from one place, and there were these 7 spirit families coming out of that put people in these 7 different tribes. When people went out, there was an impact, like a conflict, and everyone went out from that central point, which is Uluru, Ayers Rock, some people call it, that Uluru, the big rock in the center of Australia, that everybody went out from there. And it was these 7 spirit families. And I don't know, if you look at the all the stuff when they're looking at all the different, what they're calling species of human beings, like, way back, they're talking about, Neanderthals and, Homo erectus,
And
uh,
what is it,
and then
Anthropocene?
there's a couple of weird ones they call, like, the Denisovans,
Right.
and then they had that little Homo florensis, them little red people, them ones from they found in Indonesia. Keep
Hmm.
talking about Indonesia today. What's that about? But anyway, yeah, the little what they call hobbits. So, and they kind of look through all the DNA and they find all of these, all these different families, and I think there's about 7 of them.
Mm.
So maybe it's about bloodlines too. I don't know. Um, he's pretty mysterious about it though, but he reckons that's got to happen for the big cleanup to start. So the big cleanup is going to take about 1,000 years, and it's like there needs to be a fair bit of harmony to be able to do that. So anyway, that's what those symbols were for. It's a big global ritual magic, and it's a call going out to bring the 7 spirit families back together. in harmony to start the 1,000-year cleanup.
Now that 1,000 year thing shows up in a lot of different cultures as well. Hitler
Oh
wanted
yeah,
1,000 year reign. That 1,000 years shows up a lot too.
yeah, yeah. It's I don't know. Must be some kind of blackfellow Reich or something. I don't know, but it's no. I think it shows up in the maths too when you look at all the metrics of so the half life of all the radiation that's being stored from the processing of the rare earth metals that make your solar panels and your computer work. That produces radioactive waste. You look at how long that's going to take to just get vaguely under control so it doesn't kill everything. You look at how long it's going to take to get the old growth forests back again and all of those systems connected. If you do vaguely try and figure out the metrics of that and stabilizing the climate and the planet, it's 1,000 years. So yeah.
Not our lifetime, huh?
No, but we get to make room for the cultures of transition, and most cultures will be transitional cultures over that time, and yeah,
Is there a sort of a entheogen psychedelic practice within the first people of Aboriginals? Is there any work with roots and herbs, or
yeah, yeah.
really
There's heaps,
technology? What?
but you don't like. I keep getting blown away by like so many tech bros now. They're making decisions based on these things. It's incredible. So the people who are making the AIs that are going to pretty much dominate and are already dominating our lives through these algorithms, etc., they're all like weekly, going off on these trips. But so in our way, you don't have to do that much. And for most people, you do it like one time, and then that would be so. So I did that about nearly 15 years ago, and I've still got at least another 20 years to work with with what they gave me there in that place.
Mm,
I've still got at least 20 years of work to do just on what came to me from that one experience.
hmm.
So I can't understand all these people who are dropping DMT every 5 minutes and microdosing just to get through their day and all that sort of thing. It's like, whoa, like stop, slow down. you
Mm.
know, yeah, you don't need to keep doing it. Did it work that first time? It's like, okay, well, if it didn't work the first time and all the other times you've done it, if you didn't get enough to work with for at least 3 decades, then you probably need to just sort your life out first. So here's the thing, people are taking it to fix themselves, but it's like, no, you need to come to it the right way. If you're doing that, you need to fix yourself first.
Mm.
Like, you better be coming with something, with a solid foundation, with story, with a map. You better be coming with the right questions and the right way of working in the world, or you're just going to get booted straight back out again.
Mm.
You ever see Young Guns back in the day?
No.
Ah, so it's got Emilio Estevez and Kiefer Sutherland. You know, anyway, but so basically
What are
that.
Young Guns? You can't just leave us there. If I saw
Uh,
Young Guns, what would I know?
yeah, well, Lou, I don't know. Do you know Lou Diamond Phillips?
Yes, I
Anyway,
know him
we
personally. I personally know Lou.
wow.
I did a
Ask him
podcast
about
with Diamond
ask
Phillips.
him about that scene. Ask him about the peyote scene or whatever they were taking. I think it was a cactus. Anyway, I'd love to. You've got to then send me an email and tell me what he said,
He's so
because I don't
straight.
get to meet
I,
people like.
I don't believe Lou Diamond ever did any peyote. Okay, he is about the straightest cat
No, no, no. But
ever
the
met.
scene, I'd like to hear what he takes from the scene that he did
He
there,
is
because
so straight.
basically he's the Indian character, and they're all on the run, and they're at a like crossroad. They don't know what to do, and so he's the Indian character who brings the traditional plant medicine, and they all, he paints up. They all do a ceremony, but then the settler, characters, you know, they're all just so Kiefer Sutherland's just like the flower, the flower is the butterfly. The butterfly is the flower. They don't know. he just oh, and like he's just going in this weird loop, and that's where they go. But but then the Lou Diamond Phillips, his character he's like doing all this, ceremony stuff and four directions, and he's on a map, and he's actually communing with people, respectfully, and with entities, and discerning the direction that they have to travel in and what they have to do next. He's going in with a purpose and a reason and with a roadmap. He knows that world, and the other ones, they're just going nuts. One of them's shooting at an invisible chicken, and Emilio Estevez is just sitting there, just big eye, like just staring into space, freaking out. Yeah. And so I guess they could, they never quite go in, but they skate across the edge of that spirit world. And that was how the internet came into being. In cyberspace, at least, anyway. Cyberspace was invented by a bunch of, psychedelic hippies, basically, who were like, experimenting with those plant medicines, and then they had the LSD, and then off they went. And they tried to replicate that experience of that spirit world and sort of tinker a new world of spirit, that they could sort of, a new frontier basically to colonize. Yeah, you should talk to some of these tech bros. It's amazing and terrifying where they're getting a lot of this, ideas for what they want to do.
Well,
But basically, and I've talked to the best of them. Like I'm talking about the ones that designed Sophia the robot and all that kind of thing, and more than that, and they want to basically, create that world and have it all going in satellites, and then upload themselves to live forever in a cosmic consciousness, in a tinkered world of spirit.
Yeah, doesn't sound good to me.
And they talk about, the people who would stay behind, that it would be a bit like us looking at squirrels. Now, we don't have squirrels in Australia, but like these are all American people, and they're all like going, yeah, looking at the humans, us looking down from the satellites, and all the humans would just be like us looking at the squirrels in the park today. Like,
So that just sounds like another growth economy where people get to go to psychedelic world, and then there's the people who are left on Earth who are somehow funding the ability for these other people to live in these psychedelic satellite worlds.
Yeah, because for some reason they don't think about the infrastructure that's needed for that. I mean, all of this runs on rare earth metals, and it's called rare for a reason. It's this insanity of this illusion of infinite growth, that you can have infinite growth from finite resources. It's just insane. It's insane. And the worst thing is that all of the things that they're longing for and trying to achieve technologically, these are things that we could do before anyway.
Like what?
Well, the idea of uploading your consciousness, to a tinkered realm of spirit, it's like, well, why would you do all that? When you're, like a significant part of your spirit goes back to a place in the land anyway, and then another part of it goes up to Sky Camp anyway, and all these things are recycled, forever.
There's a way that
if you want to, like, okay, so, like, for example, they want to figure out how to implant chips so that you can do mind reading and telepathic communication. That's these are things we used to be able to do anyway, human beings, prior to domestication. All of these affordances that they're looking for, these magical communications and everything, these are things that people used to be able to do in other ways. I don't know.
Well, I feel like a lot of our technology is just externalizing all these things that we are just naturally capable of doing.
Yeah. You know what? I think there's a chance though that when I don't know, people get that chip put in their head, that it might reboot something, and then people will realize that they could do it without the chip in the first place.
They could
I
look
don't
at
know.
the pictures in your book and get their DNA changed from looking at those pictures.
Well, that's it. Yeah. It's like this spiritual nanotech from like an old black wizard near Darwin.
I love how you use the word black, and you were talking about the people in Russia as they were blacker than you, but they were blonde haired and blue eyed. So, what does black mean to you when you talk about someone as a black person?
It's so funny because when we get like people from America, like you actually have black skin, come over here and they hear half of us, Aboriginal people in Australia, like referring to ourselves as black, they get really upset. They're like, what? You can't say that. Because, most of us are just ambiguously non-white.
Mm.
It's like so I mean, I get at least once a week, people look at me and go like, you're not white. What are you? What are you? Oh, I'm Aboriginal. Oh, no, you're not. You're not Aboriginal. You can't be Aboriginal. Aboriginal people are black. This happens, all the time. And like I say in the book, half of us can't scrape together enough melanin to scare off a taxi at this stage, because settlers be fucking, and that's what you get. Um, yeah. So we we
Black.
still refer to ourselves. We still have this shorthand of black, and some people are taking the C out to distinguish it, so it's just BLAK. So a lot of people are saying that, especially urban indigenous people are using that spelling now to try and but we still use that shorthand because that's what comes into your language because that's what settlers call you, and you end
Mm,
up even after the melanin's gone, you're still thinking of yourself in that way when you're speaking that settler language. And it
mm,
doesn't mean the color. Um,
mm.
it's just, we're blackfellas. We've always been called blackfellas. But it's really hard for people. So yeah, when I look at these Same women who are like, pale as driven snow, but like really, really deeply, authentically indigenous and still living in this landscape and in this culture. And I look at them and I go, oh my God, they're blacker than me. it's it's a weird, confusing
So black
mix of
for you is
stuff. Eh?
black for you is deeply indigenous and rooted in your culture and your land and your heritage and your ancestry. That's what black is to you.
Yeah, that's it. But for other people, it's a different experience. It's like, bros, I haven't got time to be like grounded in the landscape. But don't tell me the dreaming story. I'm just trying to survive. Every time I walk in a shop, people are following me. Like, that's there's that experience of black as well.
Hmm.
And I just being ambiguously non-white, I don't have that to the same extent. I've only had my house raided by police 6 times in my life,
Oh, only
which is
six.
which is an incredibly privileged position to be in. I've only been abducted by police without being charged with anything and then dumped out in the middle of nowhere 3 times. That's it's a completely different it's a completely different level of experience. But for some people, that happens all the time.
Mm.
You know, so I mean, I've got 2 babies at the moment, um, and they're both so they're both from me and my woman, same parents. But one of them came out looking like my woman's father, who's like blonde and Irish. So he's a real blondie one. And then the other one, she's come out really, really dark. So they're full brother and sister. And one of them one of them's like vanilla and the other one's chocolate. And that's just how and they're going to have different experiences of elements of the world.
I want to
Um,
let anybody who's listening ask a question. If there's anybody who wants to ask a question that's here, Marissa or Will or uh, Kevin, or any of you want to ask a question of Tyson while we're here?
I actually wanted to.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
Tyson. Hi, Tyson. When you were talking about when Tanya had asked about racism, and you were talking about how it's uh, stemmed. Oh, should I unmute him?
We hear you.
Can you hear
Sorry,
me?
Yeah, we
can
hear
you
you.
start that question again? Sorry.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course. I just wanted you to go a little deeper in when Tanya had asked, well, then how do we mend or heal or start again and not uproot racism, right? and you were explaining a little bit on where that's coming from. Can you go a little deeper into possible solutions, or how, you know, we can raise our children to, at least if we can't get it out completely, like how we can help mend it?
Yeah. Well, look, so you get a rash, like definitely put some ointment on the rash, because that'll relieve that symptom for a moment. But then you probably need to have a look at treating your whole body candidal infection that's happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can't just put the ointment on. The ointment's good because it makes you feel better for a minute, but that rash is just going to pop up on your ass next. And then you won't be able to sit down for a month. So you need to actually treat your systemic candidal infection. And that's basically it's this global economic system that is over all of us. And we do need to get rid of growth-based economic system. And I know they're trying to reboot it. I don't know if you've heard about Imperative 21.
What's that?
They actually launched. If you look it up, you'll find all of their. It's not a secret or anything. They're actually launching a lot of PR around it. The Ford Foundation and a few other sort of oligarchs and technocrats have funded that. And it's this basically, they're calling it stakeholder capitalism. It's capitalism 2.0. They're trying to launch like this, this B game idea of a different brand of capitalism with feels. It's like, no, we're going to keep capitalism, right? And we'll keep all our stuff, because that's all they're trying to do now, is come up with a way that they can keep their stuff that they've stolen. Anyway, yeah, it's basically stakeholder capitalism, which means, we're going to have this same capitalist system, but, we're going to be nice to Black people, and we're going to save the environment, because enough is enough. We're wrecking the planet. Come on, people. Let's all love each other, and I can't see anything different about the way they've got it set up. They still want to have land as capital at the bottom of the pyramid that they can borrow against into infinity, to make a ridiculous pyramid scheme that will continuously, cyclically collapse and destroy half the people, who are at the bottom of it. It's just this ratchet that just keeps going, and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter until everybody's stuffed. Yeah, I mean that's the system. You can't treat the rash just with the ointment. You got to change your diet. And you might need to take something else that's going to actually kill that candida in your blood. It just might have to happen like that. And I guess that's your red pill there.
No, actually, for me, the red pill is the fact that we believe in this infinite growth economy. That's the red pill. The red pill is we've been, seduced into believing that is even possible, and that our children want to grow up and be a part of that, and that's what we've been red pilled into.
So the blue pill is. Sorry, see, I got this Matrix.
The Matrix version. There's so many versions of the red pill. My movie got a whole nother red pill thing. You got to go into the red pill men and the red pill women. There's like so many different definitions.
Yeah, I'm too much of a Lawrence Fishburne fan. So I see that red pill the other way.
I'm so grateful for this time with you. What are you going to do with the rest of your time here on the planet?
I leave the tools behind for the people who are coming next, and those tools have to be things that'll last. And the best tools we can have is good story. That they need good story, right story. They need cautionary tales about what has happened, but then they need good stories as well on top of that allow them to find the right ways to live and to be able to respond and adapt and continue and make the next thing. It's hopefully not a 2.0. It's like hopefully there's no points and there's no O's at all.
Well, thank you. Sand Talk is definitely a good story for that. And I hope that my movie Red Pill is also one of those good stories. I'm so grateful.
I think so.
For coming and spending this time with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyson.
Take care of those babies we hear. Oh, he's gone. He's gone that quick.